Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, episode 16. I'm Ryan,
I'm Amanda, and we're your hosts.
and today we're going to be talking about holding on to the memories from your trip, or holding on to your trip in general, specifically about photography and journaling.
Yeah, so do you want to start?
Sure. So I'll start with a common quote that you might have heard. It's travel is the only thing in life that makes you richer. And I don't really like that quote very much because it's like, well, what about investments, term deposits,
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I
buying?
shared that quote with Ryan, he says, well, that's not true. Stocks can make you richer. And I was like, humor me, Ryan, just a little.
I guess they're referring to richer as spiritually richer, but you could buy other things that do that. But so the point was that sometimes I really thought about traveling and experiences in general versus stuff, material goods, as I spend money on a material good that's going to be there in, a year, probably longer than that.
Yeah.
I spend money on a good dinner. 2 weeks later, I won't even remember what I had. I spend money on a trip. Those memories will last, but they fade. So it's like I could spend $2,000 to travel somewhere for a month, or I could spend $2,000 on like a motorcycle, and I'd have a motorcycle in 6 months, but I wouldn't have this trip. So I think from going traveling, I really see that there is a lot of benefit from investing in experiences over investing in goods and physical items. But it still was a kind of negative thought in my mind that made me not want to invest in experiences.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. It's hard because, yes, a trip will fade. Like your memories will fade. They won't be like you just live them every day. But at the same time, those experiences you have are with you forever and they change who you are as a person, which I think is huge.
I wasn't really saying that I still think that. I was saying that that was a thought in my mind at one point.
Yeah,
It
for sure.
was,
And I think that's probably a common thought. Would you agree?
yeah, I think that could be used as a good rationalization to not do stuff.
Especially budget.
Yeah, it's like, well, I want to buy this thing that's going to make me happy now. I think traveling would make me happier in the long term, but I can kind of just say, well, a year from now, if I buy this thing now, it gives me gratification in this moment. I'll still have that thing versus if I save for 2 months and go traveling for 2 months, then I'm just going to have nothing physical in a year. Um,
So after traveling, how do you feel about that?
I feel that traveling and investing in experiences fundamentally changes who you are. And that's a little bit harder to perceive than now having a motorcycle. It's very easy to perceive that I have a motorcycle. It's a little bit harder to perceive that I'm a fundamentally happier, kinder person. Not that I'm saying those things about myself, um, but it's hard to perceive changes in your own consciousness because your consciousness is something that perceives, not something that you can. It's hard for it to perceive itself.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing, but I definitely understand what you're saying. And I think that I agree with you. And I mean, once I have a trip in mind, I do have a fairly easy time, setting a budget and putting those wants for material items sort of aside. But, right now we don't have anything planned and it is difficult for me. It's like, do I want this material item right now? Well, like, yeah, I do.
But it's not specifically about traveling. If you're looking at investment in experience versus investment in material items, that's something that comes into day to day life. Like if we want to go for sushi tonight, or if I want to go hiking, even a time investment. Do I want to go hiking or do I want to write something? Do I want to study? You know?
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely something that does play into your day to day. Tying it back to travel, though, it is tough because your memories do fade and the trip does only last so long in like the front of your mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it becomes something a bit more vague. So the big ways people use, I think some people really recognize this when they're traveling. People, I know for me, I was keeping a journal and taking photos.
So are those the big things that you'd
Yeah.
say? Photography and journaling.
Those are the big things. I was just kind of trying to connect it to that people do kind of use those things knowing that at some point the memories are going to fade of their trip.
Yeah.
Journaling especially is someone writing for themselves, so they'll remember. I guess with blogging, there's a bit of external motivation there. You're writing for other people. Photography, I think it's a mix of both too. You're taking photos so your parents can see them, so your friends can see them, but you're also taking photos for yourself. I know one thing that we did when we came home from our last trip was print out a whole bunch of photos from us all over the world and put them all around our apartment. And just seeing those on a day-to-day basis really, it makes me connect with a lot of emotions I had there, of like the freedom and the just sense of enjoyment of being alive, that kind of slipped away as I got into more
of like a routine day-to-day.
Yeah, a job that I really didn't like, and I got kind of down on myself, and I'd kind of look at the photos from traveling and think, wow, that was awesome.
It kind of almost becomes surreal though. Like I know we had a photo of us riding an elephant printed out and framed on a wall, and I'd look at it sometimes, and the more and more time passed from our trip, it's like, did I really ride that elephant? Like that's so cool that I did that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it becomes surreal. Like it actually didn't happen to me in this life, because the life that I'm currently living is so different from that life that I had traveling.
Yeah.
Which, that's a weird sort of hard thing to deal with.
So would you say that photos are the best way to hold on to memories?
Well, I think that that's different for everybody. For me personally, I think that photos are something that I really love. Like I love flipping through photos on my camera, even, a few weeks after doing something. I love putting photos up on Facebook and having my friends see what I'm up to. I love using social media for photos. So for me, photos are a huge one.
And I think that memory works, from what I know about it. I think it works in kind of a photographic way where you kind of remember pictures of things. So having those pictures can really stoke those memories. The one thing about taking photos is, though, it kind of takes you out of the present moment while you are seeing the sights you're seeing. So you kind of have to try to strike a balance between being present and enjoying versus trying to capture these moments on photo for later.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if it is a photo that you're really like trying to get, like you're setting it up and you're really trying to get this photo so that you can post it and share it with your friends and family. And that's something that I definitely get caught up in. I think you probably have lots of memories of us being in a place and it's like, oh, I don't like the angle of this. That's not the background I wanted. Like, I don't look good in this. Oh, can we get this again? You know, and then that memory becomes all about this photo taking. It's
almost the same argument that we were talking about before that goes into place in that time period where you're thinking about taking photos, where it's, well, if I take this photo, that photo is going to be here. I'm going to have that photo forever. Versus if I just sit here, enjoy this moment, see this beautiful thing I'm looking at, and I probably won't remember that in 6 months, a year. And it's not that you lose that memory, it's just you're never reminded of it. That's when photos are there, it reminds you of these memories a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. We have quite a few friends, though, who have gone on trips, and we've never even seen photos from their trips. So what are your thoughts on taking photos in that context? Like if you're just taking photos of this trip because that's what people do, and then they sit on a memory card and nobody ever looks at them.
But they probably look at them. They probably have. I think you should be acting for yourself almost always. So with photos, I think that taking photos for other people, especially A lot of people want to go somewhere and post a whole bunch of photos on Facebook, like, fuck yeah, I'm in Ibiza or wherever. Like, hey, look at me, I'm so much better than you. I'm in all these cool places.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, I think just having photos for yourself is a good thing. Like, instead of needing other people to see those photos,
Mm-hmm.
because you going places for other people kind of short circuits a lot of the benefit, I think.
Yeah. No, I think you're completely right. I think it's so hard for me because it's like, why would I take a photo of this if nobody's ever going to see it and it's just going to sit on my memory card and
But
I might never look at it again?
but you're going to look at it again, no?
If it's just sitting on the memory card in my camera, maybe when my memory card's full and I need to delete stuff. But I'm very much like it needs to be on my computer or printed out or in a photo book. That sort of thing for me to look at it again, I think. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if taking photos is really taking away from your presence in this spectacular area or this really great moment where you're having this amazing experience and creating a memory, and you're spending all of your time taking a photo that you're perhaps not going to do anything with when you return home, maybe it's better not to spend your time taking that photo, and it's better to just sort of like live in that moment.
Mm-hmm. So you think that that taking photos definitely takes you out of those moments?
I think it can, for sure. I think that I have some memories of really wanting like a perfect photo and being so focused in on that I'm not even enjoying the beautiful scenery or enjoying this experience that I'm having.
Yeah. It's interesting because in reading The Art of Travel by Alain de something, I think his name's like Alain de Botton or something like that. We'll post a link on the show notes on worldwanderers.com. But he talks about how drawing can really enhance a moment, because if you take the time to draw something, you have to really look at it. You have to see to be able to draw. And I think that photography, in a lot of ways, if you're doing it at a kind of higher level, you really have to be able to see to know what to take the photo of, you know?
Yeah.
You have to really look at it, kind of study the thing you're looking at, and then take the perfect photo of it. But I guess a lot of what happens with traveling with like people just with point and shoot camera, or just like chick, photo, and what they're doing is just trying to capture that moment. So it's kind of coming from a place of a kind of place of fear in some ways, where you're afraid of losing that moment, and you're like, oh, I've invested this money to come here, I'm going to capture this moment.
Yeah, for sure. The Art of Travel is really interesting in that regards. I mean, he talks about thinking about your daily commute. And so for me, it's from Canmore to Banff. It's 20 minutes. You know, I drive closer and closer to Cascade. I drive past Rundle, Halling, Three Sisters, all of those beautiful mountains. He says, you know, people look at the trees, but do they really see them? You know, people look at the stuff, but it becomes what you see every day, and then you don't notice. You really don't notice, and you really don't see the details of these things that you're looking at constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when the way your brain works, it's the more you do something, the more automated that response comes. Like the more ingrained they're like neural pathways is what they call them are. So it's just it becomes autopilot, versus the first time you're doing something, it's very fresh. You have to examine each detail, and then the second time you're kind of trailing off that way.
Yeah, for sure. So one other thing that comes to mind with me in terms of photography is being in public transportation. And when you're in a really beautiful place, there's always people snapping photos out of the window.
But by public transportation, you just mean like transportation in general.
Transportation, like buses, trains, airplanes. And you know, I've been there. I want to try and capture these beautiful moments, all of them, on my camera. But one thing that I've really come to realize is photos through windows don't turn out.
Yeah.
So it's one thing that, I mean, you've really encouraged it in me. And when people pull out their cameras, I'm like, ooh, I should be taking photos too, like everybody else is. I probably should be too. But photos through windows just don't work. And so one thing that's evolved with my travel and my photography and my need to hold on to memories using photography is to enjoy the moments when I can't get a photo, to really try and be present in them, because it's like, you know what, I need to remember this and just like put it in my memory and really experience this moment, because taking a photo isn't going to give this moment justice.
Mm-hmm.
So why waste my time trying to get that perfect photo that it's not going to happen?
Yeah, we had when we were down at Iguazu Falls in Brazil earlier this year, and it was quite busy on the one side, and there's a spot where you get this amazing view of the falls. But because it's so busy, everyone's just lining up there to take a picture.
Yeah.
And so you get there, bam, photo gone. Like you can't sit there and enjoy the moment. And it made me kind of think about how, and like I was talking about earlier, how taking photos really comes from this place of being afraid to lose that moment because you don't trust in your mind. I think it's natural that memories are going to fade, but I think a lot of people, if you have kind of a trust in the fact that you're being happy right now is really all that matters at that point in time, and also that you will remember these memories down the road, and then you can just enjoy it more. Whereas if you're like, oh no, I'm not going to remember this at all, it's kind of a more of a afraid thing where you want to grab this image and put it into your camera so you can hold on to it later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that sums it up pretty nicely.
So the other most common way people used to kind of hold on to their trip would be journaling. It's kind of changed recently with the growth of blogs, because blogs kind of journal and also saves you from emailing a whole bunch of people, like all your family and relatives and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've both kept travel journals on and off the 2 times we went traveling.
On and off. I have kept a travel journal every time I've gone traveling.
Okay.
And
So,
I've done it pretty ritually.
So how do you use those travel journals now? Or how do
I use those travel journals now? I don't. I mean, while developing this podcast and going back through travels, I actually have pulled out my travel journal from 2011. And to be honest, I don't know that that's something I would have done if we were not creating this podcast. My travels from the first time I went to Europe in 2007 and then the second time I went in 2008, I don't even know where that journal is. After reading my journal from 2011, I am inspired to pull that out and read through it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's so different for me in terms of journaling and photography, because photos are something that it feels so much more tangible to me. Whereas journaling, I'm almost embarrassed. Like it feels embarrassing to read through what I wrote.
It's weird for me thinking back on, now I'm reading through my journal more to prepare for episodes for the podcast. But before, and especially in the 2 years we were working career in air quote jobs, there's kind of some hesitation to look through my journal, because the way I wrote my journal, and this is something we'll talk more about in a bit, is kind of, you can shape your journal as kind of an events-based thing, or kind of try to get, put yourself down more about what you're thinking, how you're interacting with things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I tried to write my thoughts on things. So it's really kind of like a reflection of my mind at those times. And it was almost like if I was to look at myself while I was traveling and the person I was and kind of wanted to be, and then to look at the spot I was in while I was really unhappy, depressed, going to work every day that I really didn't enjoy, having a lot of negative interactions with people, I would almost be embarrassed. It would be like looking at a reflection of myself from earlier, and that earlier version of me saying like, what the fuck's going on? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely a difficult thing. And, that's a great point that you really did capture your thoughts, because I was sort of the opposite in just retelling the experiences of what we did. And as I'm reading stuff, I'm I have memories of these deeper things that I was feeling. Like as I read, oh, we did this, it was awesome, it was great, like this food was good. I have these like feelings that come up where I'm like, oh, I was feeling really homesick at that moment, or oh, I was feeling really stressed because of this, or oh, like you and I had an argument and, that was really weighing on me. And I just wasn't putting those things on paper. And it's almost like, okay, I didn't write them, so like they're not real. I can just pretend that I didn't feel these things.
Mm-hmm. So if you're going traveling again, and you are to keep a journal, what would your journal look like? What do you think the best practices for travel journaling are?
I think, writing down the highlights, things you really enjoyed, hostels you loved, restaurants you went to, because then you can tell other people about those, and you can, for me, it's like, oh, I could put them in a blog post. I could recommend them to people that I know who are going to that place. But I would really, I felt a lot of disappointment with myself when I pulled out my travel journal from 2011. It's like, I remember feeling all these things during this time, and I wrote none of them down. Like, what was I doing?
Yeah, but that's still a good point, like a testament to your memory that 3 years ago you still remember all these things, all these feelings, emotions, and they've kind of been stoked by just simply recording the events.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody how to write a travel journal. I will not even tell anybody to do it. I would suggest doing it, and I would suggest being very raw and authentic to yourself. I think for me, there was a fear of like, oh, what if somebody reads this? What are people going to think of me? And I don't think that that's the right way to have a journal, because that's not the purpose of a journal. It's not for somebody else.
And I think my personal experiences, I found when I try to recount events, it is boring for me to write and I don't want to do it and I end up not doing it, versus there's some difficulty in being really raw and candid in your journal because you are afraid someone's going to read it, and that's kind of something I've gotten over now where I'm trying to tell people things that I might have been afraid to write a year ago. Like I'll just tell someone I met 5 minutes ago, but at that time, and part of like opening up was opening up to myself. And I found the point of what I'm trying to say is that if you are raw and candid, if you get over that initial hurdle of opening up, it's much, much more enjoyable to write. Like the words almost just like flow out of you when you've opened up to me in honesty, where it's like, we went to the Palace of Versailles. There were a lot of people there. Like that's boring. You don't want to write that.
I think that's probably what I did write in my journal. Like word for word, probably. And it's like, I really love to write, and it's something that I want to do with my life. And like, I read this journal and I'm like, I don't want to read this and then live this. Like, I know that this was awesome, but it's like saying it was awesome. That's not a good way to describe, like, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Like, how were you that day?
And I think when we talk about memory, you're going to remember easier that you went somewhere, but you won't remember how it made you feel, what thoughts it evoked, and things like that. So that's something good to capture, and it works in conjunction with your photos, where you have these photos showing you where you've been, and maybe those connect with some emotions, some feelings, some memories. And then you can look in your journal and see that, oh, we were here, I was thinking about this, and like stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing with journaling is, staying on top of it, staying motivated, getting into a routine of doing it. That's something that we've both struggled with.
Mm-hmm. The first 6-month trip we did, I was on it for about 2 months and then had a gigantic gap for about 2 months, started again for a month, was off for a while, and then right before the end wrote some more. And it's something I've noticed it's tough when you're traveling because you can't say, oh, I'm going to get up in the morning and journal every day. Well, you could. But you're not in a routine. So maybe one morning you have to get up at like 5 to catch a train somewhere. Maybe one morning you've been drinking the night before and you get up at 11 and then you've got to go see sights and stuff like that. So it's hard to find the time to make the journal. In Europe, it was cool because you're always on trains traveling around. Not always, but train travel is more popular. And then you can journal on trains versus on a bus, not so much. Like
Yeah,
in South.
buses are difficult. They don't have the table trays. They're a lot bumpier. They're not as smooth.
Hmm.
Yeah, train travel was great for journaling. That's definitely when I would do all my journaling.
So how do you think the best way to set up a routine for journaling is?
I think that you really have to want to do it. I think that if you're sitting down and forcing yourself, like, oh, I have to journal today, like, that's not enjoyable, I don't think. So having that real, like, want, like, I want to put these memories on paper. I want to share how I was feeling on paper so that I can recall it later and just really have it in my mind. And then, taking the time when you do have it. It's like, oh, we have a free morning this morning. Let's go grab a coffee and spend an hour just like writing in our journals, like making the time to do it because the time isn't going to make itself.
Hmm. But it is, I found in implementing routines that the big problem I had was that I would put so much guilt on myself. So I'd miss my journal one day and I'd feel bad about it. And when I felt bad about things, I ran away from that feeling. So I feel bad about it. And my natural instinct is to push things away that I feel bad about. So day one goes by, I push it away. So I don't even think about it day two. Then it's like, oh man, haven't journaled for 2 days. And then think about it, feel bad, kind of repress those emotions. And then like next thing you know, it's been a month. I haven't thought about it for like 16 days kind of thing.
And so then how do you get back into it?
So yeah, then it becomes like this mountain where it's like, well, I've got 30 days to write about. So and then I think my problem was there. I was trying to tackle it. I wasn't just okay saying, you know what, I've missed 30 days. That's fine. I'll start again today.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm going to go through all of this past month, journal about it, and to catch up to today. And I couldn't do that because there's no time for that.
Yeah, and that's one thing you struggled with in South America as well, too, wasn't it? Because you didn't journal for the first few months.
Yeah. And so this past time, traveling, my travel journal really just took on more of a journal outlook. I hardly occasionally mentioned the places we were, but it was more of just me writing about what's going on in my head.
And did you
And I
feel like
found,
that was valuable for you as opposed to perhaps just being like, today we were in Buenos Aires and we did this?
yeah, I think that journaling as a life habit is probably the most helpful thing I do on a daily basis. And I don't do it on an every daily basis. But for me, it helps because it's not really travel related anymore, but so many thoughts and fears and other things running through my head. And if I put them down on paper, I can really see them as irrational. A lot of them don't make sense. And it kind of gives me some distance between these things that are really upsetting me and what's actually worried and things that maybe I shouldn't even be worrying about at all.
Yeah, I mean, I've continued journaling since getting back as well, and I completely agree with you. It is a very valuable thing to do, and that brings up a great point is how do you bring these things home with you? Because one thing I thought about after university is like, wow, it would have been really interesting to have kept like a diary or a journal while I was in school because I did all these things and the memories kind of all blur together. It's like, which year did I do that in? Who was I with? Where did we go?
Yeah, no, it would be, I think that too. Like, it would be nice to be able to see what I was thinking at these points in time that I never kept a journal for. So for bringing stuff home, I really, really liked what we did in printing off a bunch of travel photos and putting them all around our house.
Yeah, and I've made travel books for 2 trips. You can make them like digitally now as opposed to like printing them out and sticking them in the sleeves. There's tons of different companies, bunch of Groupons you can get for them, and they're not expensive and they're cool. Like you can design them as a scrapbook and put whatever photos you want in them.
Yeah, it's like scrapbooking without scrapbooking.
Yeah, it's like online scrapbooking essentially. You get the book printed, they send it to you, and you've got this great photo book for the rest of your life that's capturing all these amazing memories from a trip. And we keep ours out so that other people can look at them, we can look at them.
And what website did you use to make them?
I used Pickaboo.com to make the books that I've made. There's a ton of them though. You can just Google online photo books. I'll put a link to Pickaboo though. They've been good to me, so
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend them.
And so, in terms of bringing home your memories from traveling, what do you, I guess photos kind of stoke those memories. Journaling, we've both found that we don't hardly ever look at those journals unless now that we've started podcasting, we look through them. But
Yeah, I mean, talking about travels, like I love when I meet somebody who also loves to travel, because then I get to talk about these like great travel experiences I've had. It's kind of a struggle with my friends who haven't traveled as much, because I don't want to sit there and be that person who is like, yeah, so that one time I was in Thailand.
people,
Oh,
yeah,
that reminds me of that time I was in Paris eating something delicious.
yeah, that is a thing that is kind of douchey that people do.
Oh, it completely is. And it becomes a thing. Is it like, oh, are you digging up this memory for you, or are you saying it so you can brag about this awesome thing that you did traveling?
And just to get back to journaling for a second, the thing we both did when we went traveling was make lists of things we wanted to bring home from traveling in our journals. So that would kind of apply to travel journaling.
Yeah, and so I actually didn't look at mine until I pulled out my travel journal to start podcasting. So, I mean, 2 whole years went by in which I didn't look at these things, and they became like less and less clear in my mind the more and more I worked and became completely submerged in my day-to-day life working. Were you the
Mm-hmm.
same way?
Yeah, absolutely. There were things that I think were still in my mind, but I just didn't want to think about anymore. So I think if you do um, travel journaling throughout, find is helpful and kind of just making the experience more enjoyable. Um, Not making yourself feel guilty if you don't do it for a while, and maybe not trying to tackle this mountain of lost time if you get behind. Like if you haven't journaled for a month and a half, like, you know, just forget it. Just start again. Don't worry about the past time you've missed. And then towards the end of your trip, maybe try to write out what you've learned, kind of like a summary thing that you can bring home and maybe try to come back to that summary more. And you can really connect with yourself at the end of your trip. Because what I found from traveling is that you get away from so much stuff that influences how you operate on a day-to-day basis: social circles, family, work, things that make you kind of live more unconsciously. And so my mind is very clear. Like I look back now at my journal from 2011 and I think, wow, I had these great insights and then I didn't apply any of them to my life.
Yeah, for sure. And really like putting those insights in a place where you can see them all the time. Because I think I had really good intentions, but then they're shut up inside of a travel journal that I didn't open again. So maybe writing them out and putting them on your fridge, or, setting some goals with them if that's what works for you. Printing photos and making a look board, and you can really look at that and just
Yeah.
have takeaways from your trip and special memories.
Or like creating something cool with photos, like a photo collage. Maybe like you slap some quotes on there. Maybe something you've written
Yeah, that's what I
goes
mean
on
by a
those.
look board.
Okay, I don't know what a look board is.
It's basically just like a board with like quotes and like your favorite photos and maybe some goals, just something that you look at that really inspires you. And maybe like your next travel destination, a picture of that. And that reminds you, okay, these experiences are worth not having these things right now.
Mm. And one thing I'd like to say about when we were kind of touching on it before about not wanting to make people feel bad because you've have all these memories about traveling. We were talking about people who constantly bring up travel stuff. I think like real good true friends aren't really going to make fun of you for bringing up travel memories.
No, I don't think that they will either. And I think that, I've brought up travel memories with friends and they've been okay. I think it's just, if you're talking about something that you don't need to bring up travel about, try and sort of live in the present while you're at home as well. Bring up travel memories if it's relevant to the conversation. But I think the context of saying, like, oh, people being douchey is like, if you and I are talking about, I don't even know, I can't think of an example.
Well, it's like the times where someone seems to be bringing up these things to point out that they've been to a lot of places you haven't been.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you for saying what I could not express.
Mm-hmm. So do you have anything more to add for the episode?
I encourage photo taking in appropriate context and amount, as well as I think that journaling is key. And those are my big things for traveling. What about you?
Yeah, I would say maybe try to lean toward, always when you're taking photos, make sure you take some time to just let the sights sink in with yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Trust your memory.
And if you are journaling, maybe try to focus more on how you're interacting with things and less on the actual things themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we'll post some show notes with a few photos, links, maybe a little bit of other inspiration on it at www.theworldwanders.com.
Okay, until next time.
Thanks for listening.